Welcome, campfire friends. Our last chat was about Katala and the failures there, because now we understand how the big guns came to Alaska and lost a small fortune. So here we go again. This is another true story of the real events in Alaska. This is Campfire Mike, and man, oh man, do we have a story to listen to tonight. Sit down, relax, and enjoy. It's about railroading, but not just about ballast, steel, locomotives, passenger and ore cars. It's about working on mountainsides with the thermometers registering minus 50 degrees, avalanches, rock slides, and earthquakes. Railroading runs in families as a way of life like no other, marked by exhausting hours, unforgiving cold, and danger lurking around every bend in the track. It takes sweat, grit, and muscle to drive steel through the Alaskan wilderness. And yet, the railroaders who choose it, they're dedicated. It gets in their bones, in their blood, and it's earned sense of pride. There's a rhythm to railroading, a clickety-clack, that only certain souls are wired to follow. Every second is counted as a railroading badge of honor. There's a generational pride in being a railroader. Tonight's tale is about a remarkable railroader who didn't just lay track, he laid down an Alaskan economic legacy. His name was Michael Heney, a man who helped stitch Alaska together with railroad ties and steel. So sit back, grab your beverage, and enjoy another true fantastical tale of real people and real places. Michael Heney wasn't your average railroad worker or builder or even rail engineer. He was tough, sharp, and obviously fearless. He took on the big guns and won, big time. You see, he had already built the White Pass and Yukon Route Railway, the so-called railroad that could not be built. Yep, he was told you can't build a railroad through those mountains, and guess what? He did. After completing White Pass and Yukon Rail in 1898, the unbuildable 110-mile railway built in 26 months. Months ahead of schedule, I should add. Almost immediately, he went to work building another railroad. Surprise, a really big surprise for the big guns, outsmarted a second time. You see, before there was a railroad in Katala, before there was an Alaska syndicate, the big guns, before anyone knew the name Kennecott, there were two fellas up in the Wrangles, chasing rumors and swinging picks near the Kennecott Glacier. The year was 1900. Jack Smith and Clarence Warner, who went by Tarantula Jack, were part of a small prospecting crew hired to scout a spot up Bonanza Ridge near the glacier. Most folks thought they were wasting their time. The area was remote, steep, and buried in snow half the year, and temperatures dropping below minus 50 degrees. Then they saw it. Above the glacier, the side of the mountain that looked like a bright green grassy slope, streaked with dark greens and light blues. Not just any blue-green, copper green, malachite and azurite, so rich it looked like the whole ridge had been painted with greenish blue. Jack Smith's words were simple, but they lit a fire that would change Alaska. I think we found a mountain of copper. Turns out he wasn't wrong. That single slope became the Bonanza Mine, and it would soon prove to be the richest copper deposits on Earth. Kennecott copper. Some of those first samples, over 70% pure copper. That's the kind of grade that makes investors jump, and industrialists start packing steamships. Jack Smith's words were simple, but they lit a fire that would change Alaska. 6 years later. In 1906, two of the biggest names in American industry teamed up, Morgan and the Guggenheim family. Together, they formed what would soon be called the Alaska Syndicate. They had wealth and a sharp eye for profit. What caught their attention was a rich copper strike deep in Alaska's Wrangell Mountains. A young mining engineer named Stephen Birch had already done the legwork, buying up most of the claims from the prospectors who first stumbled onto that so-called mountain of copper. But Birch didn't have the kind of money it took to develop a mine that far out in the wild. 1906, they bought a controlling interest in Birch's company and took over the claims. That's when the syndicate stepped in and went to Katala, Alaska. Now, here's the twist. Before they could get to the copper, Morgan and the Guggenheims tried to build a railroad terminus in Katala, over on the Gulf Coast. But Mother Nature had other plans. In 1907, a series of fierce storms, which destroyed the harbor, dock, and railroad route, abandoned, costing them time, money, and momentum. About the same time in 1906 and 1907, Heney, referred to as the Moose, well, he was already buying the rights of way up the Copper River corridor to the Kennecott copper mine. Heney knew copper ain't worth much if it's stuck 200 miles from any saltwater terminus. He knew the route necessary to complete a railroad. Keep in mind, he had figured out the 200-mile route before the Katala disaster. All the while, the syndicate's millionaires were still sinking money into a washed-out dream in Katala, our last campfire chat. When they showed up in Cordova in 1908, they found themselves wanting to build a terminus to nowhere. They already wasted a year trying to build a railroad in Katala and losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. When the Washington-Alaska military cable and telegraph system moved to Cordova and the big guns had no other choice and followed. Who were the big guns, you ask? The New Yorkers, not wanted in Alaska, in fears they would just take from Alaska without any real monetary contributions to the Alaska Territory. And that is exactly what they took. None other than J.P. Morgan and the Guggenheim family, the Alaska Syndicate. They owned the Kennecott Copper, a mountain of copper worth more than $200 million. In today's dollars, hovering around $3 billion, yes, $3 billion. But without Heney's path, they couldn't move a single ounce of it. How about that surprise? Well, rewind to 1897, and now you might be wondering, why did Michael Heney build the White Pass Railroad in the first place at a cost of about $10 million? The Klondike Gold Rush had just exploded. Tens of thousands of stampeders were clawing their way north to Dawson City, and Skagway turned from a sleepy coastal inlet into a lawless boom town overnight. The problem? There was no safe way inland. The only trails, White Pass and Chilkoot, were brutal, narrow, and dangerous. Horses dropped dead by the thousands. Avalanches swept men off the mountainside, and every single bag of flour or shovel had to be hauled by back or by brute force. Heney looked at that chaos and saw opportunity. He said, what we need is a railroad to the Klondike. And while engineers and bankers said it couldn't be done, Heney raised the money himself, hired the crews, and laid track through the cliffs and mountains. He didn't just build a railroad, he opened the Klondike. Michael Heney did not need federal U.S. approval in the formal sense because the White Pass line was a private international railroad. Without that railway, half of those stampeders might never have made it. That's why Heney built it, because Alaska and Canada needed it, and he had the backbone to try. Unquestionably, thousands of lives were saved, along with $1 million paycheck in his pocket. Now picture this, it's 1908. Cordova's muddy, wet, and crawling with a dozen suits from the syndicate. J.P. Morgan's boys are stomping around with leather shoes and East Coast accents, thinking they're about to conquer the wilderness. They had brought 100 or so workers to Cordova, only to be unemployed. One problem? Nowhere to build. This is the dialogue between two syndicate agents with trench coats, surveying maps. We can't build here, and we still need state territorial approval. We have no right-of-way. Some fella named Heney bought up the entire corridor. Heney? He founded and named this place Cordova. Now, before the syndicate started buying the Alaskan bounty of copper, Alaska had a territorial governor named John Green Brady. He was a good governor, he was an honorable man who believed Alaska ought to serve Alaskans, not just Wall Street bankers or mining magnates. He tried to balance development with fairness, even stood up for native communities when it counted. But when 1906 rolled around, and with it came the syndicate and a flood of outside money rolled in, Governor Brady's position? He opposed the big guns from taking the copper and leaving without making any contribution to Alaska, and that made him a big problem. Rumors of impropriety concerning Governor Brady were started. So the federal government, then President McKinley, gave him a nudge, and just like that, he was out. No trial, no scandal that stuck, just politics. His resignation came just before the syndicate locked down the Kennecott mine operations and contracts, and the territory's economic future. Prior to his resignation, notes of a territorial meeting summarizing Alaska's territorial government's position, Governor Brady didn't just lead with law, he led with scripture. At a packed hall, he read from Nehemiah, comparing Alaskans to ancient heroes, building walls against invaders. He and Lieutenant Reynolds railed against the invaders. Morgan and the Guggenheims, warning they'd capture Alaska with their railroad and Bonanza copper plan. Lieutenant Henry P. Reynolds was in charge of the Washington-Alaska military cable and telegraph system, working under Brady. But later that same day, after Brady resigned, the syndicate quietly signed a deal allowing the copper to be shipped with high shipping rates on their own wharves. They preached courage from the pulpit and then signed the contract behind closed doors. By the way, Governor Brady was not convicted, indicted, or officially censured. His resignation was political, not criminal. Brady was an upstanding man and an excellent governor. Nasty politics. He returned to his roots in Christian missionary work with the community and native people. Outsmarted and outmaneuvered, the syndicate bought Heney out, and, well, when their own engineers hit a wall, they brought him back as assistant chief engineer. Heney didn't care about the title, he just wanted the railroad built. In 1909, Heney survived a shipwreck, the SS Ohio, but the damage was done, and in 1910 he died of pneumonia in a San Francisco hospital. Heney never saw the 196-mile rail line to Kennecott completed 1 year later, but he didn't have to prove anything. Heney's know-how built a second railroading marvel, all on its own. Amazing. Okay, so summing up our chat, just how did Michael Heney contribute to the economics of Alaska? Michael Heney invested much of his railroading fortune into the Cordova town site itself, nearly $1 million in 1910 dollars. His contribution to Alaska was nearly $25 million in today's dollars, when adjusted for inflation. It may not be the wealth of nations, but the wealth of Cordova. A true economic contribution to the people of Alaska. He was genuine philanthropist, another Alaska's first, one whose charitable impact matched by his engineering to create the Heney legacy. Well, campfire friends out there, I hope you've enjoyed this story of another Alaskan hero. My hat's off to Michael Heney. Cordova still remembers Mr. Heney. Heney Peak and Heney Ridge trail that overlooks the town. I've been on Heney Ridge, and it is a beautiful tribute. A remarkable man who built what others said couldn't build. In closing, be wild and enjoy Alaska for what it is, big and bold. I truly appreciate everyone who has taken the time to subscribe. Feels like we're building a fine little circle of friends around the campfire. Thank you. This is Campfire Mike signing off.